Kia ora. The Gospel reading today is from Luke 14, about Jesus dining at a house, home of one of the Pharisees. Luke frequently depicts Jesus at dinner with a variety of hosts and fellow guests. And he's criticized for this, especially for dining with sinners. Nowadays, it would be better to substitute the word sinner with failure. When you dined, who you dined with was a way of defining you. And in a sense, it still is. In this episode, Jesus offers two pieces of advice. Firstly, in a pragmatic way, he advises about taking a lower seat at the hierarchically set table. This is not so much a deep call to humility as a warning about the thoughtlessness of pursuing self-glory and how it will backfire. Kind of a pride cometh before the fall. And secondly, he comments on the guest list. Culturally, when you receive an invitation to dine, it implies in time you will reciprocate, then as well as now. Acts of mutual and reciprocal invitation are the glue in communities, expressing and creating a sense of belonging. So to welcome one another to a table or to accept someone's invitation means obligation. But what about people who can't reciprocate, who due to poverty, disadvantage or circumstance don't have the resources to reciprocate? Jesus says such people are the most desirable guests. With such guests, there is no return, no gain for the host. To invite them is to be freed from treating hospitality or anything else as a deal that gets us where we want to go. It gets us something in return. There's no quid pro quo, for life is not a deal. And we must be careful in interpreting this passage from Luke 14, not to fall into the trap of thinking there will be a heavenly reward or divine praise for our actions. God and religion is not a deal either. The truth is that we belong together, being with one another, without obligation, without rewards, without the demarcations of privilege or poverty. That is an end in itself. This is what the kingdom of God, being in with God, with each other, with relationship. It's what it all looks like. The novel and film The English Patient is set in Egypt during World War II, and I would invite you to consider it as a parable. A married English woman, Catherine, finds herself alone in Cairo as her husband pursues a cardiological expedition. She falls in love with an impossibly exotic Hungarian nobleman, Laszlo, who is also a cartographer. Catherine's husband, sensing the affair, plans a murderous revenge. He puts Catherine in the back seat of his biplane and flies towards Count Laszlo's camp in the desert. As the plane draws near to the camp and Laszlo comes out to the landing strip to meet it, it becomes clear that Catherine's husband is intent on landing the plane right on Glasgow. But the bloodthirsty plan catastrophically backfires. It turns out that it's Catherine's husband himself who dies in the crash. Laszlo sustains only minor injuries, but Catherine, the woman at the centre of two men's passionate rivalry, is badly hurt. Laszlo carries Catherine slowly and tenderly to a cave. Now Laszlo and Catherine face a terrible predicament. Catherine's injuries are, without question, life-threatening. If Catherine's going to live, Laszlo is going to need to travel to find medical help. But finding medical help means going to Cairo. Cairo is 3 days' journey away. And it's a dangerous journey. Brigands, bandits. Even if Laszlo gets there unscathed, there may be no one he can persuade to bring help. And even if he is successful, there's only a small chance Catherine will be alive when Laszlo gets back. What are they to do? The theologian Sam Wells names this as the defining question of contemporary Western life. Because the great tide of assumptions in Western culture orients people towards solutions, towards answers, towards ways to fix things. Whether those things are the human body, the human mind, the world's economy, Ukraine, Gaza, the climate emergency. Are we ready for a problem that doesn't have a solution, a fix? Let's start with a more conventional candidate for the defining question. What's the essential problem of human existence? Wells posits that it is mortality. From the moment we come into the world, our fundamental crisis is that we're going to die. And a lot of religion has that focus. But the issue isn't that life simply is limited in terms of duration. Human flourishing is circumscribed by a host of other limitations, like disability, chronic ill health, poverty, hardship, adverse weather, famine, on and on and on. We're hemmed in on all sides, not just by death, but by a host of other constraints. What's changed in perhaps the last 70 years is that, at least in the West, humanity no longer feels such limitations are integral to its existence. There was a time when life was largely a matter of learning to live within the boundaries of limited human potential. Death took place in the home. Most illnesses had little or no chance of a cure. It was best to prepare oneself for a fragile existence. The world's resources, of course, held enormous potential, but the technology and techniques for tapping that potential were still in their infancy. But those days have gone. A cascade of technological advance in fields such as medicine, transport, and information transfer has made constraints seem absurd rather than necessary. The human project is no longer about coming to terms with limitations and flourishing within them. It's now almost without question about overcoming and transcending limitations. Human contingency is to be swept aside like racist legislation during the civil rights movement. It's not something one learns to live with. It's something one expects to conquer. Doing so is part of human self-assertion, human full expression, the spreading of humanity's wings. It seems that all are agreed that the key project of our species is the alleviation, overcoming, and transcendence of mortality. And we achieve this by inventing medicines, discovering new dimensions of experience, reducing or reversing limitations such as blindness, breaking athletic records, and circumventing such tragedies as famine or muscular dystrophy. That's what we strive for. That's what gains outstanding individuals rewards and acclaim. That's what our culture prizes most highly. When we advertise our organizations today, we seldom say, making lead pencils the same way for 150 years. No. Instead, we say, testing and stretching the boundaries of knowledge, making the impossible possible. The single notion that sums up the sense of throwing off limitations is freedom. And the term we employ most to commodify freedom and to give it retail value is choice. So the basic line in promoting what we do is to say our product or service overcomes one or more real or perceived constraints of our daily or lifelong existence, and thus gives us more choice. But what if it turned out that the fundamental human problem wasn't mortality and limitation after all? What if it turned out that all along the fundamental human problem was isolation? What if the answer for Laszlo doesn't lie in walking to Cairo? What do I mean by this? If the fundamental human problem is isolation, then the solutions we're looking for don't lie in the laboratory or the hospital or the frontiers of human knowledge or experience. Instead, the solutions lie in things we already have, most of all, in one another. There's no value in existence unless it's existence in relationship. And church and religion at their best are all about relationship. Being with one another, with creation, communing, communion. Indeed, I would say God is relationship. It's not difficult to see how a philosophy based on overcoming mortality and a philosophy based on overcoming isolation can come into tension with one another. As humanity's quest to overcome mortality has gathered pace, the degree of human isolation has increased with it. For sure, enhanced transportation, telecommunications, and information technology have made it possible to communicate in ever more extensive and complex ways. But they've also, to quote again from Sam Wells, facilitated lifestyles where people are in touch with conversation partners on the other side of the planet, but not with next-door neighbours. Where insurance lies in investments and pensions, rather than in friendships and extended families. And where face-to-face human interaction is ceasing to become the encounter of choice for a generation who are used to having plentiful alternate ways to make themselves known to one another. The flip side of making ourselves more independent and self-sufficient is that we are simultaneously becoming more isolated and more alone. And this brings me to the crucial point of purpose, or in church language, mission. If you see the central quest of life as being to overcome isolation rather than to overcome limitations, your notion of purpose or mission will change. Mission that seeks to overcome isolation doesn't look to technology to solve problems, but becomes recognizing those from whom one is alienated and seeking and finding ways to be present with them. Mission doesn't assume the solution is to make other people more like us by ensuring they have what we have and live as we live. It is simply being with, listening with, dining with one another. Being with is both the goal and the means. Let's return to the parable of the English patient. Think again about Laszlo's choice of whether to stay beside Catherine and be her companion in her last hours, or walk to Cairo in search of assistance. In the story, Laszlo scarcely thinks twice before he sets off on his 3-day journey to find help. He has all sorts of adventures before he finally makes it back to the encampment. And when he does, Catherine is very, very dead. Laszlo is so committed to believing there's a solution to Catherine's agonizing plight, and that he has the solution, that he overlooks the one thing needed, that is being with Catherine. He's so concerned to solve the problem that he leaves her alone in her hour of greatest need. Could it be possibly the real reason Laszlo went to Cairo was because he couldn't bear to watch Catherine die? Maybe. Is not Western late modernity a culture in which we fill our lives with activity and creativity and productivity because we fear if we sat still we'd go to pieces? It never occurs to any of us to think this frenzy of programming, experiencing and sampling is madness. On the contrary, it's those who lag behind or stand outside our frenetic world that we regard as mad or failures, sinners. Maybe like Jesus, it's those who we need to dine with, listen to, and be with. What's at the bottom of all this fixation on activity? We're trying to make a world that can withstand the fragility of relationships. If you've got a problem, there's a host of solutions. How much of this is like Laszlo walking to Cairo? What Catherine needed was a man she loved to be with her as she faced the near certainty of her own impending death. But Laszlo didn't, or maybe couldn't, give her what she needed. We're turning our society into a Laszlo society, full of products, full of gadgets, full of devices, full of techniques, full of energy, all of which make the world go round very effectively. The result is that we've all become Laszlo. Yet the irony of the film is that when Laszlo, returning to Cairo with Catherine's body, crashes another plane and is himself horribly injured, he's found in the desert and carefully extracted from the wreckage and tenderly accompanied by strangers who then care for him until the point of death. He receives from strangers at the end of his life the patient love he wasn't able to give to Catherine at the end of hers. Can we, in the face of every pressure of our culture and our day, learn from this parable and come to be wiser than him?